Darling, your mom changed the password. I can't use her card anymore. The scream tore through the morning like a siren. I was standing by my kitchen window, coffee cup halfway to my lips, when I heard it. Tanya's voice. Sharp. Furious. Desperate. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just set the cup down slowly and waited. Because I knew what was coming next. 30 seconds later, tires squealed in my driveway. A car door slammed so hard I felt it in my chest. Then came the footsteps, heavy, angry, stomping across my porch like thunder. My son burst through my front door without knocking. His face was the color of a Georgia sunset, red, burning, about to explode. "Mom," Lionel said, his voice shaking with rage. "What did you do?" I turned to face him. Calm. Steady. My hands folded in front of me like I was about to say grace before Sunday dinner. "I changed my passwords," I said quietly. "You and your wife won't be using my money anymore." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Tanya appeared behind him in the doorway, her face twisted with something between shock and fury. Her perfectly manicured nails clutched her phone like a weapon. "You're being selfish, Eudora. We've been counting on that account. We have bills." "Then pay them," I said. "With your own money." Lionel's jaw dropped. He looked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. Like the woman who raised him, who fed him, who worked double shifts so he could go to college. Like that woman had suddenly become a stranger. "You can't be serious," he whispered. "I've never been more serious in my life. If you've ever been taken advantage of by family, by people you loved more than your own breath, then you know the weight of that moment. That second when you finally say no. When you finally draw a line in the sand and watch them rage against it like waves against a shore. Hit that like button if you understand what I'm talking about. Because this story, it's going to speak straight to your soul." Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Tanya let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scream. "Fine. Keep your money. Don't expect us to help you when you're old and useless." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "I already am old. But I'm not useless. Not anymore." Lionel stood there, breathing hard, his fists clenched at his sides. For a second, I thought he might actually cry. But instead, he turned on his heel and walked out. Tanya followed, throwing one last venomous look over her shoulder. The door slammed. The car started. They were gone. And I stood there in my quiet kitchen alone, feeling lighter than I had in years. But here's what they didn't know. What nobody knew. My late husband Herbert and I had a secret. A piece of land we bought decades ago that everyone said was worthless. Swamp ground. Not fit for anything. Last year, the county announced plans for a new industrial complex. Our worthless swamp became prime real estate overnight. The sale closed 3 months ago. $900,000. I didn't tell a soul. Not my son. Not his wife. Nobody. They thought changing the password was the shock. They thought cutting off the card was the punishment. They had no idea the real storm was still building on the horizon. As I watched their car disappear, I whispered something Herbert used to say. "The people who take without asking will never stop if you keep opening your hand." My hand was closed now. And what they were about to discover would shatter everything they thought they knew about their foolish old mother. Let me take you back to where this all started. Before the screaming. Before the passwords. Before I realized that the people I loved most were slowly bleeding me dry. My name is Eudora Mabel. I'm 71 years old, and I've lived in the same house in Savannah, Georgia, for over 40 years. The paint on my porch is peeling. The oak tree out front leans a little lower every summer. My rocking chair creaks like old bones when I sit in it. But it's home. Or at least, it used to be. 15 years ago, I lost my husband Herbert to heart failure. We'd been married 40 years. The day he died, I thought my heart would stop beating too. Herbert was steady, protective. The kind of man who fixed things without being asked and held my hand during thunderstorms even though I was the one afraid, not him. He left me with enough savings to live comfortably. A modest pension. This house we built with our own hands, brick by brick, dream by dream. And he left me with Lionel. Our only child. My world. I spoiled that boy more than I should have. New shoes every school term even when his old ones still fit. Double shifts at the diner so he could go to college out of state. Money wired every time he called crying about unexpected expenses that somehow always happened right before the weekend. Herbert used to shake his head at me. "You're making him soft, Eudora. A man needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet." But I couldn't help it. He was my baby. My miracle. The doctors said I'd never have children, and then Lionel came along like a gift from God himself. I would have given him anything. And that's exactly what he learned to expect. When Lionel brought Tonya home for the first time, I tried my best to be welcoming. She was beautiful in that sharp, polished way some women are. Always dressed in bright colors. Jewelry that caught the light and demanded attention. Her laugh was loud. Her smile was wide. But her eyes were cold. I saw it the first time she walked through my door. The way she looked around my small living room, taking inventory. Calculating. Measuring worth. Herbert saw it too. The night before their wedding, he pulled me aside in the kitchen. "That woman doesn't love our son," he whispered. "She loves what she thinks he can give her." "You're being too harsh," I said, even though something in my gut twisted. "She's just young. Ambitious." Herbert kissed my forehead. "Don't let love make you blind, Eudora. The people who take without asking will never stop if you keep opening your hand." I should have listened. At their wedding, Tonya thanked me in front of everyone for raising such a generous man. The guests clapped. I smiled. But later, lying in bed alone, I replayed that word in my head. Generous. She didn't mean kind. She didn't mean loving. She meant financially generous. Subscribe if you believe parents deserve respect, not exploitation. Because what came next will make your blood boil. The first few years after they got married were fine. They visited on holidays. Brought my grandson Avery, who had Herbert's smile and my stubborn chin. I'd cook Sunday dinners, fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread with honey butter. We'd laugh, tell stories, feel like family. But then Herbert died. And everything changed. Suddenly, Lionel and Tonya started visiting more often. At first, I was grateful. The house felt so empty without Herbert's footsteps. His coffee brewing at dawn. His voice calling me Dora girl from the porch. But their visits weren't about comfort. They were about opportunity. It started small. Innocent, even. "Mom, the car needs new tires. Can you help us out? Just until payday. We're a little short on groceries this week. Mind if we borrow your card for a quick trip to the store?" I'd hand over my debit card or write a check, telling myself it was temporary. That family helps family. That's what Herbert would have wanted. Except Herbert would have seen right through it. Payday would come and go. Nobody mentioned paying me back. The borrowed card stayed in Tonya's wallet. The quick grocery trip turned into subscription services I didn't recognize on my bank statements. I told myself I was being paranoid. Ungrateful. They were busy with jobs and raising Avery. They needed help. But deep down, in the quiet moments when I sat alone in Herbert's chair, I knew the truth. I wasn't helping them. I was enabling them. And the worst part? I was too afraid to stop. Too terrified that if I said no, they'd disappear. That I'd lose my son. My grandson. The only family I had left. So I kept opening my hand. Kept giving. Kept pretending I didn't notice my savings account shrinking month after month. One night, I was going through old photo albums. Pictures of Lionel as a baby. His first day of school. His graduation. His wedding. I found a photo of Herbert holding newborn Lionel in the hospital. Herbert was looking down at our son with so much love it made my chest ache. And written on the back, in Herbert's handwriting, were 5 words that stopped my heart. Teach him to give, not take. If only I had listened to that voice before it was too late. The visits became routine. Predictable. Like clockwork, Lionel and Tanya would show up every Sunday after church. At first, I'd get excited. Set the table nice. Make Lionel's favorite peach cobbler. Put out the good napkins Herbert's mother gave us for our wedding. But the warmth started to fade when I realized they weren't coming for me. They were coming for what I could give them. "Mom, you make the best pot roast," Tanya would say, her smile sweet as molasses. Then, before dessert was even served, she'd lean in close. "By the way, we're a little behind on the electric bill this month. Could you spot us $200? Just till Friday." Friday would come. No mention of the money. No thank you. No acknowledgement that I'd just paid to keep their lights on while I sat in my house turning off lamps to save on my own bill. Lionel was worse because he knew better. He'd been raised better. "Ma," he'd say, rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he was a boy and broke something. "Tanya really needs new work clothes. Her boss is on her about looking professional. Can you help us out?" Help us out. That phrase became their favorite weapon. Because how do you say no to helping? How do you tell your own son that you're tired of being treated like an ATM in a building shaped like a mother? I couldn't. So I didn't. I'd hand over my card. Sign the check. Watch them smile and hug me and promise they'd pay me back soon. They never did. The thing about slow poison is you don't realize you're dying until you're already too weak to fight back. That's what their love became. Poison disguised as family dinners and my grandson's laughter. Every visit ended the same way. A request. A guilt trip wrapped in flowery language about family sticking together. About how I always said I'd be there for them no matter what. "You always say family helps family, Mom," Tanya would remind me, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. And I'd nod. Agree. Hand over whatever they needed because the alternative, losing them, felt worse than being used. Herbert's voice played in my head constantly during those months. "Don't let love make you blind, Eudora." But I was already blind. Willfully, desperately blind. Ever had someone use your kindness against you? Comment, "I understand" below. Because this next part is where things went from bad to unforgivable. One Sunday afternoon, they showed up without calling first. No heads up. No asking if it was a good time. Tanya walked straight to my purse hanging on the kitchen chair. Dug through it like she was looking for her own wallet. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She pulled out my debit card and held it up like a trophy. "Relax, Mom. We're just grabbing a few things from Target. Avery needs new shoes." "You could have asked," I said quietly. "I'm asking now," she replied, already heading for the door. "We'll bring it back later." Lionel wouldn't even look at me. Just followed his wife like a puppy on a leash. They didn't bring the card back that night. Or the next day. When I finally called 3 days later, Tanya acted annoyed. Oh my God, I forgot I had it. Sorry. We've just been so busy. Busy spending my money, I thought. But I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I said, "It's okay. Just drop it off when you can." When she finally returned it a week later, I checked my account. $743 in charges. Target, Amazon, DoorDash, a liquor store. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. $700. Gone. Without permission. Without even a conversation. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and cried for the first time since Herbert's funeral. Not because of the money. Money can be replaced. I cried because my son, my baby boy who I'd sacrificed everything for, didn't even respect me enough to ask. I was invisible to him. A wallet with a heartbeat. A resource to be drained. The next morning, I noticed something else. My debit card wasn't in my purse where Tonya said she'd put it back. It was missing again. I called Lionel. No answer. Called Tonya. Straight to voicemail. For 3 hours, I sat by the phone, my chest tight with panic and anger and something worse, the creeping realization that they'd taken it again without asking. When Lionel finally called back, his tone was casual. Unbothered. Oh yeah, Tonya needed it for groceries. She'll bring it back tomorrow. Lionel, I said, my voice trembling. That's theft. You can't just take my card whenever you want. He laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, Ma. Don't be dramatic. It's not like we're strangers. We're family. Family. That word used to mean love. Protection. Loyalty. Now it meant access. Entitlement. Ownership of everything I had. That night, I realized they weren't visiting me anymore. They were visiting my bank account. It started with small charges I didn't recognize. A subscription to some streaming service I'd never heard of. Monthly payments to a gym I'd never been to. Little things that made me squint at my phone screen and wonder if I was losing my mind. Maybe I did sign up for that, I'd think. Maybe I'm just forgetting. But the charges kept coming. And they weren't small anymore. $89 to a meal kit delivery service. $112 to an online clothing store. $45 every month to something called premium cloud storage. I didn't even know what cloud storage was. One morning, I sat down with my laptop and a cup of coffee that went cold while I scrolled through 3 months of bank statements. My stomach turned with every line. Subscription after subscription. Purchases I didn't make. Restaurants I'd never been to. And then I saw it. The one that made my blood run cold. A payment to a furniture store. $2,800. My heart hammered in my chest. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called Lionel first. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Lionel, call me back. Now. There's a charge on my card I didn't make. I tried again. Voicemail. So I called Tonya. She answered on the 3rd ring, breathless and irritated. Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Can this wait? No, it can't, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There's a $2,800 charge on my card from a furniture store. I didn't make that purchase. There was a pause. Then she laughed. Actually laughed, light and dismissive, like I'd just told her a silly joke. Oh, that. Yeah, that's for the new sectional we ordered. Lionel said it was fine since you always help us out. It's for our living room. The old couch was falling apart. The room spun. I gripped the edge of my kitchen table to steady myself. You spent $2,800 of my money, I said slowly, without asking me. For a couch. It's not that big of a deal, Mom. Her voice had an edge now. Annoyed that I was making a fuss. You always say family helps family. We were going to pay you back next month anyway. For whose living room? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ours, obviously. She said it like I was stupid for even asking. Look, I really have to go. We'll talk about it later. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. $2,800. Gone. Without permission. Without even a conversation. And when confronted, Tanya acted like I was the problem for being upset. If this made your jaw drop, don't forget to like this video. Because it gets worse. That afternoon, I did something I should have done months ago. I went through every statement. Every charge. Every suspicious purchase. Turns out, the sectional wasn't the first big-ticket item. There was a $1,500 payment to a resort in Florida from February. A $900 charge to a jewelry store in March. $600 at a high-end restaurant I couldn't even pronounce the name of. They'd been living off my money for months. Maybe longer. And I'd been too trusting, too afraid, too desperate to keep them close to see it. I thought about calling Lionel again. Demanding an explanation. But I already knew what he'd say. He'd make excuses. Tanya would play victim. They'd promise to pay me back and then never mention it again. Just like every other time. I opened my laptop and stared at my bank account. Watched the numbers that Herbert and I had worked so hard to save slowly disappearing into someone else's pockets. My hands hovered over the keyboard. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I remembered something Herbert told me the week before he died. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. He took my hand and squeezed it. If I go before you, Dora girl, promise me something. Anything, I whispered. Promise me you'll protect yourself. Even from the people you love. Especially from them. Because the ones closest to you are the ones who can hurt you most. I'd nodded, not really understanding what he meant. Thinking he was just being maudlin because he was sick. But sitting there in my kitchen, staring at that $2,800 charge, I finally understood. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's permission to be destroyed. That night, I made a decision. A quiet one. The kind that doesn't need to be announced or justified. I logged into my bank account. Changed the password. Then I changed every other password I had. Credit cards, email, PayPal, my pension portal. I locked my debit card through the app and requested a new one that would take a week to arrive. No warning. No explanation. No family meeting to discuss boundaries. I just did it. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up in a panic, wondering what they'd bought while I was sleeping. But peace doesn't last long when you're dealing with people who think they own you. And that's when the scream shattered the silence. Darling, your mom changed the password. The phone call came 2 days after I changed everything. It was a Friday morning. I was watering my tomato plants in the backyard, enjoying the quiet, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Tanya's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the decline button. But some small, foolish part of me still hoped maybe she was calling to apologize. To acknowledge what they'd done. To make things right. I answered. Mom. Her voice was clipped. Cold. My card got declined at the grocery store. What's going on with your account? Not hi, how are you? Not is everything okay? Just an accusation disguised as a question. I changed my passwords, I said calmly. And locked my card. You won't be using it anymore. Silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums. Then she exploded. Are you serious right now? We have groceries in the cart. I'm standing here looking like an idiot because you decided to throw a tantrum. It's not a tantrum, Tanya. It's my money. And I'm taking it back. Taking it back? She laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. You can't be serious. We've been counting on that account. We have bills to pay. Then pay them, I said quietly. With your own money. Unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable. I could hear her breathing hard, trying to control her rage. After everything we've done for you, all the times we've visited, all the dinners, taking care of you since Dad died. Taking care of me? I interrupted, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. Tanya, you haven't taken care of me. You've taken from me. There's a difference. Oh my God. Her voice went high and theatrical. You're being so selfish right now. Do you even realize that? Lionel is going to be so hurt when I tell him his own mother cut him off without even talking to him first. Something inside me cracked. Not broke. Just cracked open, letting light into a dark place I'd been avoiding for too long. Let me be very clear, I said, my voice steady as stone. You spent $2,800 of my money without asking. You've been using my card like it's yours for months. Taking it from my purse. Making charges I never approved. That's called theft, Tanya. Not family. Theft. We were going to pay you back. When? You've been saying that for 2 years. I'm still waiting. She made a sound between a gasp and a growl. Fine. Fine. Keep your money. But don't come crying to us when you need help. Don't call Lionel when you're old and sick and alone. Because we're done. If that's what you choose, I said softly, then that's what you choose. She hung up. No goodbye. Just dead air. I stood there in my garden, phone still in my hand, waiting for the guilt to hit. The regret. The fear that I'd just destroyed my relationship with my only child. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Share this story if you've ever had to choose peace over pleasing others. Because what happened next changed my life forever. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and Herbert's photo in my hands. The one from our 20th anniversary. We were standing on a beach in South Carolina, his arm around my waist, both of us grinning like teenagers. You were right, I whispered to the picture. You were right about everything. Herbert had tried to warn me. Tried to tell me that love without boundaries would destroy me. That giving without limit would teach people to take without shame. But I'd been too afraid. Too desperate to keep my family close. Too willing to sacrifice my dignity for their approval. The phrase family helps family echoed in my head. How many times had Tanya thrown those words at me? How many times had I nodded and smiled and opened my wallet? But family isn't supposed to bleed you dry. Family isn't supposed to use your love as leverage. Real family uplifts, supports, gives back. Real family doesn't scream at you for protecting yourself. That night, I made another decision. One that had been brewing in the back of my mind since the day I found out about the sectional. Herbert and I had bought 20 acres of land outside town 30 years ago. Everyone said we were fools. It was swamp ground. Mosquito heaven. Not worth the paper the deed was printed on. But Herbert had a feeling. Land is land, Dora. They're not making any more of it. We held onto it. Paid the taxes every year even when money was tight. Never told anyone about it because it wasn't anyone's business but ours. Last year, the county announced plans for a new industrial complex. Suddenly, developers were calling. Making offers. Big offers. We sold it 3 months before Herbert died. The check cleared for $900,000. I'd kept that money separate. Secret. Safe. Because something told me I'd need it someday. That I'd need a lifeline when the people I trusted most proved themselves untrustworthy. And I was right. Now, sitting at my kitchen table, I knew exactly what to do with it. Not a penny would go to Lionel. Not a dime to Tanya. But my grandson Avery? That sweet boy who had nothing to do with his parents' greed? He'd be taken care of. I'd set up a trust. Money he couldn't touch until he turned 25. Money his parents couldn't manipulate him into giving them. And the rest? I'd donate it. To the women's shelter that helped me through the darkest days after Herbert died. To the food bank. To people who actually needed it. I'd lived this long on Herbert's pension and my savings. I didn't need $900,000. But I did need peace. I needed to know that my money would do good in the world. Not fund sectionals and vacations for people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lionel and Tanya had been draining my regular account for months, thinking that was all I had. They had no idea about the land. The sale. The fortune sitting in a separate account they didn't even know existed. And with that, I made a decision that would change everything. The night I changed those passwords, I didn't sleep. Not because I was worried or afraid, but because for the first time in years, I felt awake. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the blue light casting shadows across Herbert's empty chair. One by one, I went through every account. Bank. Credit cards. Email. PayPal. Even the pension portal I barely used. New password. Security questions changed. Two-factor authentication turned on. Every click of the mouse felt like taking back a piece of myself. A piece I'd given away too freely. A piece they'd taken without asking. When I finished, it was 3 in the morning. The house was silent except for the old clock Herbert's father gave us ticking on the mantel. I sat back in my chair and exhaled. Really exhaled. Like I'd been holding my breath for 2 years and finally remembered how to breathe. Then I did one more thing. I locked my debit card through the banking app. Requested a new one that would take 5 to 7 business days to arrive. No warning. No explanation. No phone call to discuss boundaries or feelings or family obligations. I just did it. And it felt like freedom. The next morning, I woke up at dawn. Made myself a proper breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast with real butter, coffee that didn't taste like worry. I sat on my back porch and watched the sun come up over the oak tree, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. Didn't wonder what they were buying with my money. Didn't calculate how much longer I could afford to keep giving. I just sat. Just breathed. Just existed without fear. Subscribe to see what happens when quiet justice begins. Because what came next would shake their world to its core. That afternoon, I went to see my lawyer. Martin Hayes had handled Herbert's will and helped us with the land sale. He was a good man. Honest. The kind who told you the truth even when it wasn't what you wanted to hear. Eudora, he said, standing when I walked into his office. Good to see you. What can I do for you today? I want to set up a trust, I said, sitting down across from his desk. For my grandson, Avery. Martin nodded, pulling out a legal pad. All right. How much are we talking about? $400,000. He can't touch it until he's 25. And his parents can't access it. Ever. Martin's eyebrows went up, but he didn't ask questions. Just wrote it down. And the rest of the money from the land sale? I want to donate it. Split between the women's shelter on Oak Street and the food bank. Anonymously. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. That's a good thing you're doing, Eudora. It's the right thing, I said quietly. Money should help people, not enable them to hurt you. We spent the next 2 hours going through paperwork, signing documents, making sure everything was airtight, making sure Lionel and Tanya couldn't challenge it or manipulate Avery into giving them access. When I left Martin's office, I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying bricks in my pockets and finally emptied them out. The money was protected. Avery's future was secure. And the people who'd tried to drain me dry would never see a penny of it. That night, I cooked myself dinner. Nothing fancy. Just chicken and rice and green beans. But I set the table nice. Used the good plates. Poured myself a small glass of wine Herbert had been saving for a special occasion. This felt special enough. I raised my glass to his empty chair. You were right, Herbert. About everything. I should have listened sooner. The clock ticked. The house settled. And I ate my dinner in peace, knowing that the storm was about to hit. Because Tanya would try to use the card again. And when it declined, she'd panic. She'd call. She'd scream. And I'd be ready. 2 days later, it happened. Morning peace shattered by the sound of screeching tires in my driveway. The car door slamming like thunder. Footsteps pounding across my porch. And then the scream that would change everything. Darling, your MOM changed the password. Lionel stood in my doorway, chest heaving, fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Behind him, Tanya looked like a wild animal. Eyes wide, face flushed, her phone clutched in one hand like evidence at a crime scene. You're going to fix this, Lionel said. Not asked. Demanded. Right now. I stood in my living room, calm as Sunday morning, my hands folded in front of me. No, I'm not. Mom. His voice cracked. We have bills to pay. Groceries to buy. You can't just cut us off without warning. I can, actually. It's my money. Tanya pushed past him, her heels clicking on my hardwood floor. This is insane. We've been counting on that account. We've got payments set up. You're going to make us look like deadbeats. Then maybe you should have asked before spending thousands of my dollars, I said quietly. We were going to pay you back. She shrieked. When, Tanya? You've been saying that for 2 years. Lionel ran his hands through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything we've done for you. All the times we've visited. Helped you around the house. Helped me. I let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Lionel, you haven't helped me with anything. The last time you visited, you took my debit card from my purse without asking and spent $700. That was one time. It was every time. My voice stayed steady, even though my heart was hammering. Every visit ended with a request for money. Every phone call was about what you needed. I stopped being your mother and became your bank. Hit like if you believe boundaries are a form of love. Because this moment right here, this is when everything changed. Tanya's face twisted into something ugly. You know what? You're being selfish, Eudora. We have a child to raise. We have a life to maintain. And you're sitting here in this house all alone with more money than you need, acting like we're criminals for asking for help. You didn't ask, I said, my voice dropping lower. You took. There's a difference. Oh, please. She waved her hand dismissively. You love playing the victim. Poor Eudora, everyone takes advantage of her. Maybe if you weren't so weak, people wouldn't walk all over you. The room went silent. Even Lionel looked shocked. I took a step forward. Just one. But something in my face must have changed because Tanya actually stepped back. Let me tell you something, I said, my voice quiet but sharp as glass. I spent 40 years building a life with a man who loved me, who respected me, who never once made me feel small. And in the 2 years since he died, you've treated me like an ATM with a heartbeat. So no, Tonya, I'm not weak. I was just too kind. And I'm done. Fine, she screamed. Keep your money. Don't expect us to help you when you're old and useless. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And I smiled. Sweetheart, I already am old. But I'm not useless. Not anymore. Lionel's face had gone pale. For just a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Shame, maybe. Or regret. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. Mom, he said quietly, you're really going to do this? You're going to choose money over family? No, son. You did that. A long time ago. He stared at me. Then he turned and walked out. Tonya followed, but not before throwing one last venomous look over her shoulder. You'll regret this, she hissed. I already do, I said. I regret not doing it sooner. The door slammed. The car started. They were gone. And I stood there in my quiet living room, alone, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Because standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you strong. And sometimes the people who call you selfish are just upset they can't use you anymore. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From relief. From the weight of finally saying no. Outside, the oak tree swayed in the breeze. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. And I thought about Herbert. About what he would have said if he'd been standing there. He would have been proud. But I didn't regret it. I was just getting started. 3 weeks passed. 3 beautiful, quiet, peaceful weeks. No phone calls demanding money. No surprise visits that ended with my wallet lighter. No guilt trips wrapped in phrases like, family helps family. Just silence. And it was golden. I spent my mornings in the garden, coaxing tomatoes and peppers from the earth. My afternoons reading books I'd meant to get to for years. My evenings on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, watching the neighborhood kids play tag in the street. For the first time since Herbert died, I felt like myself again. But I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't over. People like Lionel and Tonya don't just walk away when the money dries up. They wait. They regroup. They come back when they think you've softened. So I waited too. And I made plans. You see, that land Herbert and I bought all those years ago? The swamp ground everyone said was worthless? The county had closed the deal last year. $900,000 deposited into a separate account Lionel and Tonya didn't even know existed. All those months they were draining my regular checking account, buying sectionals and jewelry and resort vacations. They had no idea I was sitting on a fortune. The irony was almost funny. Almost. I'd already set up the trust for Avery with Martin's help. $400,000 locked away until he turned 25. His parents couldn't touch it. Couldn't manipulate him into giving them access. It was protected by law and paperwork thicker than my Bible. The rest of the money, nearly $500,000, I'd split between the women's shelter and the food bank. Anonymously. No plaques with my name. No recognition. Just quiet help for people who actually needed it. Comment below. What would you do if you suddenly found yourself holding $900,000? I'll tell you what I did. I made sure it went to people who deserved it. One afternoon, I got a call from the shelter director. Her name was Patricia, and she'd helped me through some dark days after Herbert passed. Grief counseling. Support groups. Just a listening ear when I needed one. Eudora, she said, her voice thick with emotion. We just received an anonymous donation. $250,000. It's the largest gift we've ever gotten. We can finally renovate the second floor. Add more beds. Hire another counselor. I smiled into the phone. That's wonderful, Patricia. You all do such important work. I wish I knew who to thank, she said. Maybe that's not what matters, I replied softly. Maybe what matters is that someone saw your work and wanted to help. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and cried. But they were good tears. Clean tears. The kind that wash away bitterness instead of adding to it. Money can't buy happiness. But it can buy peace of mind. It can protect the innocent. It can help people who are hurting. And that's worth more than any sectional sofa or vacation or piece of jewelry. That evening, I was watering my roses when a car pulled into my driveway. For a second, my chest tightened. But it wasn't Lionel's car. It was Martin's. He got out with a folder under his arm, smiling. Eudora, got a minute? Always, I said, setting down the hose. We sat on the porch, and he handed me the folder. Trust is all set up. Ironclad. Avery will get full access when he turns 25. Until then, it's managed by a trustee. His parents have zero control. I opened the folder and looked at the papers. All official. All legal. All protected. Thank you, Martin. One more thing, he said, pulling out another document. The donations cleared. Both organizations received their funds. They're over the moon. I nodded, feeling that clean tired feeling you get after doing something right. You did a good thing, Eudora, Martin said quietly. Not a lot of people would have the strength to do what you did. I didn't have a choice, I replied. It was either stand up for myself or let them destroy me. And Herbert didn't raise no fool. Martin laughed. No, he didn't. After he left, I sat on the porch until the sun went down. Watched the lightning bugs come out. Listened to the crickets sing. And I thought about my son. About the boy he used to be. The man I'd hoped he'd become. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost himself. Or maybe I'd just been too blind to see who he really was. Either way, the man who'd stormed into my house 3 weeks ago wasn't the son I'd raised. And I couldn't keep sacrificing myself on the altar of who I hoped he'd become. Sometimes love means letting go. Even when it hurts. Even when it feels like failure. But it's not failure. It's survival. And weeks later, Lionel and Tonya returned, broken and desperate. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one who felt small. 4 weeks after the confrontation, my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. Lionel's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the decline button. But curiosity won out. Hello. Mom. His voice was different. Smaller. Tired. Can we come by? We need to talk. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. Not anger. Not demands. Just exhaustion. When? I asked. Now? If that's okay. I looked around my living room. Clean. Peaceful. Mine. All right. Come by. They arrived 20 minutes later. And the difference was shocking. Tonya's designer clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and a plain t-shirt. No jewelry. No makeup. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in a month. Lionel looked worse. Dark circles under his eyes. Shoulders slumped. The cockiness and entitlement that had radiated off him before had evaporated. They stood on my porch like strangers asking for directions. Come in, I said quietly. We sat in the living room. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The clock on the mantel ticked. Outside, A dog barked. Finally, Lionel cleared his throat. Mom, his voice cracked. He tried again. Things have been rough lately. I didn't say anything. Just waited. My hours got cut at work, he continued. And Tanya's car broke down. We've got bills piling up. The mortgage is 2 months behind. Tanya stared at her hands. Silent. Defeated. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it. Not because I wanted to help, but because I genuinely felt sorry for what they'd become. We were wondering, Lionel said, his voice barely above a whisper, if maybe you could help us out. Just to get back on our feet. We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. There it was. The real reason they'd come. Not to apologize. Not to admit what they'd done. But to ask for more. Like this story, if you believe karma always finds its way home. Because what I said next changed everything. I took a breath. Let it out slowly. I'm sorry, son. I don't have any money to give you. His head snapped up. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. I don't have money to help you. Tanya's eyes narrowed. You're lying. You've got your pension. Your savings. That house is paid off. I have enough to live on, I said calmly. But nothing extra. Certainly nothing for sectionals or vacations or jewelry. Lionel's face went pale. Mom, please. We're about to lose the house. Can't you? No. The word came out firm. Final. I can't. And even if I could, I wouldn't. Why? His voice broke. Why would you do this to us? I'm not doing anything to you, Lionel. You did this to yourselves. Tanya stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're sitting on money. I know you are. You're just being spiteful. Think what you want, I said. But the answer is no. She looked at Lionel, waiting for him to do something, say something. But he just sat there, staring at his hands. Fine, Tanya spat. We'll figure it out ourselves. Like we always do. She stormed out. The door slammed. For a moment, I thought Lionel would follow. But he didn't. He sat there, shoulders shaking. And then he started to cry. Not angry tears. Not manipulative tears. Real ones. The kind that come from somewhere deep and broken. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I wanted to go to him. To hold him like I did when he was little and had nightmares. But I stayed in my chair. I know you are, I said softly. We got so used to it. To you always being there. Always helping. And then when you weren't, he wiped his eyes. I didn't realize how much we'd been taking advantage until it was too late. That's the problem, Lionel. You shouldn't have needed me to cut you off to realize you were hurting me. He nodded. Silent. Broken. I love you, I said. I always will. You're my son. But love doesn't mean access. And I can't save you from consequences you brought on yourselves. He stood up slowly. I understand. Do you? I'm starting to. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. For what it's worth, Dad would be ashamed of me. I know that. Yes, I said quietly. He would. Lionel walked to the door. Paused with his hand on the handle. If I ever get my act together. If I ever become the man you raised me to be. Can I call you? You can always call me, son. But that doesn't mean I'll always give you what you want. He nodded. And then he left. I sat in my quiet living room for a long time after that. Thinking about the boy he was. The man he'd become. The man he might still be if he chose to change. But that was his choice. Not mine. I'd done my part. Raised him. Loved him. Sacrificed for him. Now it was time to let him stand on his own 2 feet. Even if that meant watching him fall. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face their consequences. Let them learn that the world doesn't owe them anything. That love has limits. That respect is earned, not demanded. And as I sat there, I realized something profound. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel angry. I felt free. 6 months have passed since that day. 6 months of peace I didn't know was possible. My garden is thriving. The tomatoes are the best I've grown in years. The roses Herbert planted 20 years ago are blooming like they're trying to make up for lost time. I've started volunteering at the food bank twice a week. Sorting donations. Packing boxes for families who need help. Nobody there knows I'm the anonymous donor who made their expansion possible. And that's exactly how I want it. Patricia from the shelter calls me sometimes. Just to chat. To tell me about the women they've helped. The children who have beds now because of the renovations. The counselor they hired who's already made a difference in so many lives. Every call reminds me why I did what I did. Why boundaries aren't selfish. Why protecting yourself is an act of love, not cruelty. Avery came to visit last week. Just him. No parents. He's 12 now. Growing like a weed. He brought me a drawing he made in art class. A picture of an oak tree with a bird's nest in the branches. "That's your tree, Grandma," he said, pointing out my window. I drew it from memory. We sat on the porch and ate cookies I'd baked that morning. He told me about school. About his friends. About the book he was reading. He didn't mention his parents. And I didn't ask. Before he left, he hugged me tight. "I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweet boy. More than you know." Someday, when he's 25, he'll find out about the trust. About the $400,000 waiting for him. Money his parents can't touch. Money that will give him opportunities they never had because they were too busy spending instead of building. I hope he uses it wisely. I hope he understands why I did it. Why I chose him over them. If this story touched your heart, please like, share and subscribe, because sometimes the best revenge is peace. And the best justice is protecting the innocent while letting the guilty face their consequences. I haven't heard from Lionel or Tanya in 3 months. I don't know if they lost the house. I don't know if things got better or worse. And truthfully, that's not my burden to carry anymore. I did my job. I raised my son. I loved him the best way I knew how. But somewhere along the way, he made choices. And those choices have consequences. I can't save him from himself. I can only save myself. Last Sunday, I went to visit Herbert's grave. Brought fresh flowers, daisies, his favorite. Sat on the bench nearby and talked to him like he was sitting right next to me. "You were right about everything," I said. About Tanya. About boundaries. About not letting love make me blind. A breeze rustled through the trees. A bird sang somewhere overhead. "I miss you every day," I whispered. "But I'm okay now. I'm finally okay." And I meant it. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean you stop loving the people who hurt you. It just means you stop letting that hurt define you. When Tanya screamed that morning, "Your mom changed the password," she thought she was talking about a bank account. But she was wrong. I didn't just change the password to my money. I changed the password to my peace. My dignity. My life. I took back control from people who thought love meant unlimited access. Who thought being family meant never having to ask permission or show respect. And in doing that, I found something I'd lost years ago. Myself. The version of me that Herbert fell in love with. The version that knew her worth. The version that understood love should add to your life, not subtract from it. So here I sit, in my creaky old house with the peeling paint and the leaning oak tree. Alone, yes. But not lonely. Because loneliness isn't about being by yourself. It's about being with people who make you feel invisible. And I'm done being invisible. I'm done being someone's backup plan. Someone's emergency fund. Someone's last resort when life gets hard. I'm Eudora Mabel. 71 years old. Widow. Mother. Grandmother. And I'm finally, beautifully, peacefully free. The moral of this story isn't complicated. It's simple, really. Never let guilt make you feed those who would drain you dry. Family should uplift you, not use you. Love doesn't mean access. And when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Quiet justice isn't loud. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't require revenge or confrontation. It's just you, standing firm in your truth, reclaiming your dignity one boundary at a time. That's what I did. And if you're in a situation where someone is using your love against you, I hope my story gives you the courage to do the same. Because you deserve peace. You deserve respect. You deserve to be more than someone's ATM. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is to simply say no. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. We share real experiences that inspire, challenge, and remind us all that we're not alone in this complicated thing called life. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Together, we can inspire others to choose peace over pleasing, boundaries over guilt, and self-respect over sacrifice. Until next time, remember, changing the password to your peace isn't selfish. It's survival. And you deserve to survive. Retry.